Sounds True presents Robert Anton Wilson Explains Everything, or Old Bob Exposes His Ignorance, Session 5. The lecture you are about to hear was originally recorded in 1986 and called The Acceleration of Knowledge, in which Robert Anton Wilson presents his idea of the jumping Jesus phenomenon, or why life has gotten so complicated so quickly.
There's an old Jewish story about a man who liked to play the violin. He had this habit, though. He kept playing the same note over and over. It amused him. Perhaps it gave him a deep ecstasy. But that was his shtick. He kept playing the same note over and over. After several years, his wife finally got to the point where even her wifely patience was exhausted, and she said to him, "Max," she said, "Max, Max, for God's sake, Max. Other men who play the violin, they don't always play the same part of the string. They play up and down the string, and they play on all the strings. They make melodies, and they make counterpoint. They make sonatas. They make forms, not the same note over and over." And Max looked up from playing his one note, and he said, "They're looking for the place. I found it." I thought of Max last night in Boulder. Last night I had the wonderful compliment of having people marching around the church where I was speaking, protesting against me. It's a wonderful feeling to think you're important enough that people will protest against you. I took the leaflet they were giving out, and they claimed I was a servant of Satan. And that's a high compliment, too. I mean, that gives you a certain glamorous aura. Don't you feel you're getting your money's worth if you think that maybe you got an agent of the devil came here just to deceive you? I haven't felt so good since Mae Brussel. Any of you heard of Mae Brussel, or is she strictly a California? Somebody's heard of Mae Brussel. She's the world's leading authority on conspiracies. And she wrote in Conspiracy Digest that I was an agent of the Rockefeller conspiracy. That's not quite as good as being an agent of the devil, but it's pretty good. I wrote in right away to the next issue confessing that it was true, and my cellar is full of bars of Rockefeller gold stacked from the floor to the ceiling. I thought that would improve my credit rating. Actually, neither Satan nor the Rockefellers have been very eager to recruit me, and so I'm still pretty much on my own. As far as I know, the CIA has a term, useful idiot. Now, that describes somebody who's working for them and doesn't know it. And I find it a very useful yoga to stop at least once a day and ask, am I a useful idiot? You never know. Max, with his one note, reminded me of those chaps protesting in Boulder, because they have one explanation of the universe, and it's the final explanation, and it satisfies them. I call such types Johnny One Note types, after Max and his one note, and after the song Johnny One Note, recorded by Judy Garland some years ago. There are many one-note theories around. There's the Marxist theory, which holds that the whole universe was explained when Marx published the last volume of Das Kapital in 1892. There's the objectivist theory, which holds that everything was explained when Ayn Rand published Atlas Shrugged in the early 1950s. And then there's the fundamentalist theory that everything was explained when the King James translation of the Bible was finished. What I am offering tonight is a slightly different perspective, which holds that nothing has been explained yet in full, and that our picture of the universe is constantly changing. Thailand is responsible for two of the major contributions to civilization. Everybody in an audience like this will know that the first is Thai sticks. I know what kind of audience turns up for my lectures. And the other was bronze. Thailand happens to be rich in copper and tin, and so they were naturally the people who first smelted copper and tin and produced bronze, and thereby they created the Bronze Age. and what we mockingly or despairingly or satirically refer to as civilization, or as women's liberationists call it, patriarchal civilization. The Thais, after they invented bronze, they also invented the lateen sail and the broad-ribbed ship, and they started sailing all over the Pacific and across the Indian Ocean, and eventually they brought the Bronze Age to the Middle East. And curiously enough, you'll find, although there's no clear picture of how this migrated from Thailand across the Indian Ocean and then jumped, you find on the western coast of Africa, you find the Berber people have lateen sails, just like the one the Thais have been using for the last 6,000 years. And you'll find those lateen sails used on ships along the Gaelic-speaking area of western Spain and in Breton, France, and in Western Ireland also, in Connemara and Clare and the other western counties of Ireland, which may explain what William Butler Yeats meant when he said Ireland was part of Asia until the Battle of the Boyne. Then again, sometimes it's impossible to explain what Yeats meant by anything. But the spread westward from Thailand of Bronze Age culture is what Alvin Toffler calls the first wave. Bronze Age culture was based on large-scale agricultural civilization, usually with a god king at the top. The god king was identified with the sun in most cases, and we find this pattern of large-scale agricultural civilization with a god king at the top spread pretty rapidly across the world. From the time the Thais discovered bronze up until about the 18th century, it was still spreading into other areas of the world. Then came the Industrial Revolution, which is what Toffler calls the second wave. But before I get to that, considering the spread of the first wave, Bronze Age civilization, large-scale agriculture across the world, by 1 AD, the center of this whole process was Rome. That is to say, Rome was the center, and that Rome was the biggest empire of all the empires that had grown up from the beginning of the Bronze Age until 1 AD. There had never been an empire of that size up until that date. The Roman roads went damn near everywhere, and all the knowledge of the world found its way back to Rome and was processed there and then was transferred elsewhere where it was useful to the Roman Empire. So Rome was both the mercantile and intellectual center of the world in 1 AD. And this brings us to the beginning of what I call the jumping Jesus phenomena. Georges Anderla, a French statistician and economist, did an analysis